Theories of Creation, Talk 3. This talk is about the day-age theory. As the name suggests, this theory interprets the days mentioned in Genesis 1 as representing ages of time rather than 24-hour periods of time. This view that the word day in Genesis 1 does not refer to a literal day of 24 hours can be found as far back as the 1st century AD, with the Jewish scholars Philo around 20 BC to AD 45 and Josephus AD 37 to 103. Both question the notion that the world was created in 6 literal days, and Josephus commented that the expression one day needed an explanation, but which he apparently never gave. In the 2nd century AD, Justin Martyr and Irenaeus used Psalm 90 verse 4 and 2 Peter 3 verse 8 as support for their view that the creation days were each 1,000 years long. Augustine's view was that it was difficult to think, let alone explain in words, what the days in Genesis meant. And there's many other earlier writers who refer to Genesis 1 and express their doubt that the days should be understood literally. Therefore, it's clear that long before modern-day ideas on the geological ages and the theory of evolution came on the scene, Jewish and Christian scholars considered there was a problem with the days in Genesis being interpreted as literal 24-hour periods, such that God created all things within 144 hours. In modern times, there have been many who also hold this view, and one of these is Dr. Hugh Ross of the Reasons to Believe ministry in the USA. The length of the days in Genesis are believed to be millions of years in accordance with modern geological theories, which hold that the Earth and the formation of the rock strata in the Earth's crust are millions of years old. There seem to be as many scholarly arguments for accepting the word day to mean longer than 24 hours as there are for rejecting this theory. For example, S. van Mierlo, in The Divine Plan, has the following notes on the words day, morning and evening. He says, the Hebrew word yom, translated day, does not necessarily indicate a period of 12 or 24 hours. It's often used for a period of an undetermined duration. The Hebrew word boker, translated morning, has the general meaning of beginning. See, for example, Psalm 90 verse 14, early in the morning. The word translated by evening indicates an ending, Ecclesiastes 11 verse 6, which is speaking about the beginning and the ending of life. Note that in the 1st chapter of Genesis there's no question of nights. It's referring to long periods of divine activity. And Dr. Hugh Ross states this in Creation and Time. The same author of Genesis, that is Moses, wrote in Psalm 90 verse 4, for 1,000 years in your sight are like a day that has just gone by, or like a watch, 4 hours in the night. Moses seems to state that just as God's ways are not our ways, Isaiah 55 verse 9, God's days are not our days. Dr. Hugh Ross also points out the unusual syntax of the sentences enumerating specific creation days. After each day, it is said, and was evening, and was morning, day 1, and so on. He concludes, this syntactic ambiguity suggests that day here has to be taken in some unusual manner. P.J. Wiseman in Clues to Creation in Genesis agrees that the most outstanding literary problem on the first page of the Bible is the precise meaning of the 6 days, separated as they are from each other by an evening and a morning. However, he comes to a very different solution to the problem, as we shall see in Talk 12, Creation Revealed in 6 days. It's also pointed out that in Genesis 2 verse 4, the literal Hebrew reads, these are the generations of the heavens and the earth when they were created in the day of their making. As it is obvious that the word day here refers to all 6 creation days, it's used as further proof that the word day should be taken as meaning longer than a 24-hour period. However, in answer to that, P.J. Wiseman states that the word day here is, and I quote, a compound of the day of with the preposition in, which, according to the genius of the Hebrew language, makes it an adverb and must be translated when, or at the time, or after. And that is, in fact, the way it is translated in the New International Version, which uses the word when. The day-age theory also emphasises the uniqueness of the seventh day. It's pointed out that after each of the first 6 creation days, Moses wrote this: "There was evening and there was morning, the first day," and so on. Whereas no such wording is attached to the seventh day, and it's therefore suggested that this day has not yet ended. As it is stated that God rested from his work on the seventh day, this is interpreted to mean that ever since the seventh day began, God has rested from his work of creation. God created everything during 6 long geological ages of millions of years, but since the 2nd chapter of Genesis, he's ceased from creating, so that nowadays we're living in the 7th day, which has so far lasted only a few thousand years. It's additionally suggested that at some time in the future, God's rest from creation will end, and at that time he will create new heavens and a new earth, as described in Revelation. As additional proof for the antiquity of the earth, various biblical texts are also referred to. Habakkuk 3 verse 6 describes the mountains as ancient and the hills as age-old, and in 2 Peter 3 verse 5 the heavens and the earth are said to have existed long ago. There are also various figures of speech used to describe the eternity of God's existence, which compare it to the longevity of the mountains or to the foundations of the earth. For example, Psalm 90 verses 2 to 6 and Micah 6 verse 2. It's suggested that such direct descriptions and metaphors would lose much of their impact if, in fact, the earth and heavens were only a few thousand years old. Now, what are the advantages of accepting the day-age theory? The theory allows time enough to elapse in Genesis 1 to accommodate the current scientific understanding of how old the Earth, the solar system, and the universe are. The majority of modern scientific theories may be embraced, while still holding to the literal interpretation of Scripture. There's no problem with having enough time to fit in all the events which happen on the 6th day. Genesis 1 makes it clear that male and female are referred to on the 6th day, which means that Eve was included. But in Genesis 2, there are a number of things which Adam did before Eve was created. God placed him in the Garden of Eden to take care of it. He was given instructions about the tree of knowledge of good and evil. God brought all the animals and birds to Adam for him to name them. No suitable helper was found for Adam among any of those, and so God caused Adam to fall into a deep sleep during which he created Eve from part of Adam. If it's believed that this 6th day was in fact a geological era of a few million years, then these events could easily take place towards the latter end of this era and have occurred over a period of days or weeks or months or even a few years. But what are the disadvantages of accepting the day-age theory? Well, firstly, there's nothing in Genesis 1 itself which suggests that the word day should be understood as an extended period of time. The day-age view is usually adopted because to take the days as 24 hours is unbelievable for various reasons. Secondly, there's a large discrepancy in the length of the days, in that the first 6 are held to last for millions of years each, whereas the 7th has only extended for a few thousand at most. And then thirdly, there's many scholarly arguments as to why the Hebrew word yom for day should only be understood as a 24-hour period in Genesis 1, just as there are many scholarly arguments against that. Anyone who's not a Hebrew scholar himself is therefore put into the position of having to choose which authority he prefers to accept. So for the sake of balance here, I'll quote from Hebrew expert C.D. Ginsburg, who says this: "There's nothing in the first chapter of Genesis to justify the spiritualization of the expression day. On the contrary, the definition in verse 5 of the word in question imperatively demands that yom, the Hebrew word for day, should be understood in the same sense as we understood the word day in common parlance, that is, as a natural day." And then the fourth disadvantage, Exodus 20 verse 11, refers to the creation, and it says this: "For in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth and the sea and all that's in them, but he rested on the 7th day. And therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day, and he made it holy." God gave this as a reason for man to keep the Sabbath day as a special day, separate from the other 6. It's clear that in this fourth commandment, when man is told to work for 6 days and rest on the 7th day, that the days are literal days. By analogy then, it also seems sensible to understand that the 6 creation days and the subsequent day of rest should also be understood to be literal days. In answer to that argument, it's alternatively suggested that the emphasis in Exodus 20 is on the pattern of 1 day out of 7, not the literal duration of the days of creation. Dr. Hugh Ross said that in Creation and Time. And he also added this: "We need to recognise that the analogy of our Sabbath to God's Sabbath does not demand 7 24-hour days. Age-long creation days fit the analogy just as well, if not better." Again, we're in the position of deciding which analogy we feel is more appropriate in those verses. And then the fifth. Additionally, if we understand the 7th day as being the current age we live in, then we have to explain in what way this is holy, as Genesis 2 verse 3 tells us that God blessed the 7th day and he made it holy. In what way is this current age holy? And sixthly, some also see that the fact that this theory allows death of animals to occur before sin came into the world as a major reason to reject the theory altogether. They believe that no death of any kind occurred before Adam's sin, and that therefore only a brief time could have elapsed between creation and Adam's sin. Now this view is based on Romans 5 verse 12, which says, "Just as sin entered the world through one man, and death through sin, in this way death came to all men because all sinned." This verse is interpreted to mean that not only did man's death come about due to sin, but so did the death of the animals. The statement "death came through sin" is emphasised, whereas the statement following, which says that death came to all men because all sinned, is not. As a result, such people believe all death came as a result of sin, not just human death. And therefore, if animals died only as a result of sin, then the logical conclusion must be that none died before Adam sinned. And if that's the case, then creation must only have taken place a very brief time before Adam fell, and not millions of years beforehand in accordance with the day-age theory. However, personally, I don't feel this is a valid argument against the day-age theory. The verse in Romans makes it clear that death came to all men because all sinned. Only humans have ever been described as sinners, so only humans can experience death through sin. Plants and animals do not die because they sin. In addition, 1 Corinthians 15 verse 22 says, "For as in Adam all die, so in Christ all will be made alive." If we believe that animals die as a result of Adam's sin, this verse would indicate that we should also believe that animals are resurrected. Not only this, if animals are sinful, it seems there would have been little value in Israel sacrificing them as sin offerings to the Lord. In the next talk, we'll look at progressive creation, which is usually adopted by those who accept this day-age theory.